Daredevil, Born Again could use another reboot. The Man Without Fear is back, officially within the MCU, and ready to kick ass. So why does this Marvel TV show feel so stillborn? In the first episode of Daredevil, Born Again on Disney+, Karen Page, Deborah Ann Woll, teases best friends Matt Murdock, Charlie Cox, and Foggy Nelson, Elden Henson, about their tendency to indulge in nostalgia for the pre-gentrification days of Hell's Kitchen. Not nostalgia, Foggy insists. Reverence for the past, yet hope for the future. It's an apt choice to begin the series, which sees Cox, Woll, Henson, and others reprising their roles from the mid-2010s Netflix Daredevil series, where Matt split his time between his legal practice with Foggy and his extracurricular work as the red-clad vigilante. The Netflix show is considered by many comics fans to be the high point of the first wave of Marvel Comics TV adaptations from that decade, which for the most part have been treated by current Marvel management as if they never happened. Marvel nerds may not feel nostalgia for some of the other shows of that phase, like Iron Fist or Helstrom, but there was audible excitement in theaters when Cox cameo-ed as Matt in Spider-Man No Way Home, along with a hope for a future where the better parts of that era don't have to be snapped out of existence, Thanos-style. Born Again, though, feels caught between past and future, in its relationship to the Netflix show, in the tug-of-war between two different creative teams, and in the larger picture of Marvel television. It has some exciting moments and strong performances from Cox and several other Netflix alums, including Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin of Crime, and John Bernthal as Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. But as a whole, it's a Frankenstein monster of a season, with various parts stitched together in ungainly fashion. It is, in other words, the inevitable end product of a filmmaking approach that has gradually proven untenable, even if it has roots in the comic book publishing origins of characters like Daredevil and Kingpin. Because Stan Lee was working on so many different Marvel Comics titles at the same time in the early 60s that birthed Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and so many more iconic characters, he simply didn't have time to write full scripts for them the way comic book scribes usually did at the start of the process. Instead, he would hand artistic collaborators like Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby the broadest of outlines and invite them to plot out each issue as they drew them. Then, once they gave him back the illustrated pages, Lee would come up with dialogue and captions to match, or, at times, would use those elements to change the artist's intention to something he preferred. It was an unpredictable, at times combustible approach that contributed as much to the energy of those classic Marvel comics as the ideas that Lee, Kirby, and the others were throwing into them. Though Lee didn't invent this particular workflow, he made it famous, eventually dubbing it the Marvel Method. The Marvel Method endured for many years after Lee stopped actively co-writing most of Marvel's line, and is still used on occasion today. For the most part, though, the comics business realized at some point that it was usually better, and almost always easier, for the writer to have the whole story planned out before the artist began drawing it. Kevin Feige, who for nearly 2 decades has played the role of Stan Lee in Marvel's ascension to the dominant force in modern filmmaking, gradually came up with his own version of Lee's approach. Let's call it the Marvel Cinematic Universe method. In this method, writers and directors are assigned to individual films or shows, but rarely are they empowered the way they might be in a traditional studio ecosystem. Like Stan Lee looking at what Jack Kirby or Don Heck drew, and only then deciding what the story was definitively about. Feige likes to figure out projects once they get into post-production, often requiring reshoots to help shape the pre-existing footage into the shape Feige and the other MCU execs eventually settle on. While that unconventional technique worked like gangbusters from the first Iron Man film through Avengers Endgame, it's proved less effective in recent films. And the MCU method is even more antithetical to the way television has been made, with a single producer, usually a show's creator and chief writer, getting to call the shots. Since Feige took over Marvel's TV